Journey to the Trinity, and it's about situations that ex-Muslims go through when you come to the Lord Jesus Christ, and how you learn about doctrinal issues that, as a Muslim, you were kind of taught against. And we are really blessed. This has been a real treat for the several past several months that we've been able to have our friend and our brother Robert Spencer with us. And thank you so much for being with us today, Mr. Dr. Spencer.
Always good to talk to you. Thank you.
Yeah, God bless you. And I've been there's several things, urgent things that we want to talk about today that I'd really like to get your insight into, because so much is happening so fast, as always, being so close to an election, the insanity in the world. And anyway, like I said, the first time you came on, you don't hear very many voices of reason, like a voice in the wilderness. And so it'd be nice to get a little bit of clarity from your perspective about some of this insanity that's going on.
Okay.
So, but before we do, I saw something that piqued my interest. I don't know if you want to talk about, but I'm going to go ahead and show it to you. And then if you'd like to say something about it, I found it extremely interesting. I didn't know nothing about this. And I'm just going to play this video. Let me see if you can
Yeah, I know what
see
that
if you,
is.
okay. Uh,
That the FBI undercover agent had actually traveled to Garland, Texas, and was present at the event.
I was shocked. I mean, I was shocked that the government had turned this over. I wanted to know, when did he get there? Why was he there?
And this past November, Maynard was given another batch of documents by the government, revealing the biggest surprise of all. The undercover agent was in a car directly behind Elton Simpson and Nader Sufi when they started shooting. This cell phone photo of school security guard Bruce Joyner and police officer Greg Stevens was taken by the undercover agent seconds before the attack.
All right, so Robert, just briefly, because we only have 5 full minutes, briefly explain what the event was about once again, because people have forgotten it, unfortunately.
Steve, this was an event in defense of free speech. We were responding to the Charlie Hebdo massacre of the Muhammad cartoonists and saying that if Muslims are going to say that they will kill us for drawing Muhammad cartoons, then we either have to draw Muhammad cartoons or submit and surrender to violent intimidation. So this was an event to show that we would not submit and we were going to stand for the freedom of speech.
Did you know any of this, what we just played here and what was revealed on 60 Minutes until it aired on 60 Minutes on Sunday?
Some of it came out last summer, but before the event took place, the FBI did not give us any indication of an imminent attack.
okay. Now,
Blast from the past.
so the just for those of you who've never, or who watch this, who've never heard this, um, apparently when that shooting happened in Garland, Texas, there was an FBI agent's car behind the car of the shooter, and he was texting the shooters.
Yeah, and he said tear up Texas, and then he lied about it at the trial of one of the people involved, another plotter who the shooters were in touch with, and he said that he didn't know that the shooters were there when obviously, as you see, he was right behind them. And so that he didn't notice that he was following a car into the parking lot that had Arizona plates, because let's remember this was in Texas, and these jihadis had traveled 8 hours from Arizona to kill us. And so he's in touch with these guys from Arizona that he knows want to kill us, and he's going to the event, and he's right behind a car with Arizona plates, and then he doesn't know that the plotters are there, that the jihadis are there. Come on, the FBI either drastically bungled this operation or they actively wanted us dead.
Ah, wow. I mean, I watched this. I couldn't believe it. I mean, but the fact that it was on 60 Minutes,
Yeah, it
what
was on 60 Minutes. we learned a lot on that that we hadn't known before. The FBI never responded to our inquiries for information, even though we were the intended victims, the intended targets.
Wow. And this was during Obama's presidency.
Yeah, and so that's why, people think it's crazy. I think people think it's a lot fewer people think it's crazy now than they did when I first started saying it, that I think the FBI was trying to kill me. It sounds insane, but I think after the Russian collusion hoax that the FBI was so deeply involved in, its desperate attempts to frame and destroy the president, a lot of people understand how corrupt this organization really is. And so they don't have any trouble understanding this. And like I say, I don't know for sure, but either they're drastically incompetent, either they can't tie their own shoes practically because they knew this event was going to be targeted by jihadis, and yet they didn't have any security there to stop the jihadis, but only had this one undercover agent who's egging them on. Either they're totally incompetent, or the Obama administration or the FBI and the Obama administration thought that they would make an example of us so that people would understand that you have to respect the Islamic blasphemy laws, because otherwise you're going to get killed even in the United States. There's not going to be any protection here any more than there is anywhere else. And well, there wasn't. As it happened, we just had hired our own security people, and they killed the jihadis after they shot, I believe it was Mr. Joyner who was mentioned in that report, but they shot one of the security people and then they were taken out.
Wow. Wow. Who was the director of the FBI at this time? Do you know?
Gee, I don't know if it was Comey or Mueller. It was one of the two. But when did Comey take over? I don't remember. I think actually I think it would have to have been Comey, but I'm not entirely sure. But
Dang.
Obama said, remember, the future must not belong to those who slander the Prophet of Islam. He's essentially saying in the future, we're going to all be submitting to Sharia blasphemy laws, to uh, condemnations to the death penalty for criticizing Islam. And so, how much of a stretch is it that Obama would think this was a good thing to do? And I'm not saying I have any information that he himself was involved, but it may be that his FBI thought that they would please the boss by giving us up in this way. That we were a major embarrassment. We were roundly condemned by everybody after the thing. Nobody said, "Hey, good, you were standing up for the freedom of speech." It's only if you get killed that they say that, like with this school teacher in France now. If he had not gotten killed, he was about to get fired for showing the Muhammad cartoons. He was called in and interrogated by the police, not the
Really?
people threatening him. Yeah, 4 days before he was killed. And so if he hadn't been killed, he would have been just the opposite of a hero. And if we had been killed, we would have been heroes. But as it is, everybody was saying, what a stupid, crazy stunt to draw Muhammad when you know it's going to bring on this violence. Well,
Hurt
I don't
feeling.
believe in giving in to violent threats, and I think that if you do give in to violent threats, you're only going to get more violent threats. So it's a favor to the future not to give in to violent threats and to try to set a precedent in that way. But anyway,
Wow.
also
Uh,
remember Tom Perez, who is, I believe, still the head of the Democratic National Committee. Tom Perez, he said that when he was Assistant Attorney General, if I recall correctly, but in any case, he was an Obama administration official, and he was questioned in the Senate as to whether the Justice Department would ever pursue the criminalization of criticism of any religion. Now, you would think that would be an easy question because the First Amendment exists, and it would be plainly unconstitutional to criminalize criticism of any religion. But the Obama administration was actively courting Islamic support both inside and outside the country. And so Tom Perez said he wouldn't answer the question. He kept dodging it and saying it was a hard question and so on. So he would not put the United States government on record ruling out the criminalization of criticism of Islam. So in light of those things, how far-fetched is it that they wanted this to look like a bungled FBI operation. It either was a bungled FBI operation or was made to look like one.
And if
And if
anything
anything
happened,
happened,
they could have just
they
thrown
could
this
just throw
guy
this
in
guy in
the boat, thrown
I'm sorry,
this.
you're breaking up. I didn't get that. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm hearing an echo there. I'm not sure if it's okay. Is it all right now?
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, and I'm thinking that, if anything went wrong, they could just throw this guy under the bus.
yeah.
Just say this guy, this FBI, he's a little player in this, and we could just throw him under the bus.
Mhm.
But man, to hear that the FBI was trying to, you know what? If you look at the pieces, that's why I thought, oh, this will be explained. But then, but the more I watched it, and then the fact that it was actually on 60 Minutes,
Mhm.
so that this wasn't a secret that the FBI was doing this, and
No.
it just
That's
looks
how
like
we found
a duck if it looks like a duck, and it quacks like a duck, and it walks like a duck, there's a
Yep,
likelihood that it's a duck.
the likelihood.
Wow, that is unbelievable, man. Anyway, I saw that yesterday, and I couldn't believe it. I want to ask you about it. So, anyway,
I
there's
was
a
young.
couple. I'm sorry.
I was younger then.
Yeah. Actually, I won't
I
go
guess
into.
we all were, but
I
anyway.
won't go into anything about that situation. Just because. Anyway, I better not say
That's
anything.
good.
But
I'm sorry. I didn't mean that.
I wanted to ask you a couple of other things, just quickly before we get into our main subject. Which I want to talk about France. I want to talk about what's going on in France. Um, I wanted to ask you. I know you talked about this before, but I listened to it again yesterday, and it just kind of piqued my interest about a guy named, is it Sophronius?
Sophronius.
Yeah, Sophronius. Yeah, could you tell me his significance in
Yeah.
the story of Muhammad? Just because, uh, you know what? The more you hear that, the more you think, dude, something, something doesn't smell right.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. This is part of the inquiry into how Islam got started, and there's a growing body of thought among people who have looked into this that Islam does not come from Muhammad and his claims to be a prophet. That there was actually no Muhammad who claimed to be a prophet, or if there was, he didn't do most of the things that it is said that he did in Islamic tradition, because those Islamic traditions date from the 8th and 9th centuries, and Muhammad is supposed to have died in the early 7th century. And there's no indication before the 8th or 9th centuries that any of that material existed. Even when the Arabs are conquering all over the place, there's no mention of Muhammad or Islam or the Quran. Couple of mentions of Muhammad, but no indication. Actually, what is said about him in those mentions is, in the first place, very sparse, and in the second place, does not match what Islamic tradition says about him. So anyway, Sophronius. One of the most famous stories of the early Islamic conquests is that the Patriarch of Jerusalem, in those days, the Patriarch was the head of the church in that area, and still is actually. And in those days, there was no civil authority. It was nominally part of the Byzantine Empire, but the Byzantines didn't have enough manpower to really occupy the area. And so the church officials were the highest officials in the area, de facto. And so Sophronius is the one who, according to a very famous story in Islamic tradition, Sophronius met the Caliph Umar at the gates of Jerusalem in 639 and welcomed him into the city after the Arabs had conquered it. And Umar is taken all around the city and shown what's there by Sophronius. And they get to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is the church that holds the tomb of Christ, the site of the resurrection, traditionally. And Sophronius invites Umar to pray inside. And Umar refuses and says, "No, I will not pray inside, because then my followers will want to take this cathedral as a mosque. And so I'll leave it as a church. I won't go in." And so this story is still told to this day as a sign of Islamic tolerance and magnanimity and goodness to the unbelievers. However, there is no record of that story until the 9th century. Nobody tells it before that, or at least no records exist. And you might think, well, it's oral tradition. They didn't write everything down. Sure, okay. But we do have a lot of the writings of Sophronius from the 630s, including rather detailed sermons and other writings referring to the Arab conquest. And never does he say that the people who came in called themselves Muslims. Never does he say that they had a new prophet or a new holy book or a new religion. And he doesn't mention Umar. None of these things are in there. And so it's very strange because Sophronius's writings are among the earliest accounts that we have of the activity of the Arabs after they came out of Arabia. And so you would expect that if they had just heard a few years before from Muhammad, their prophet, that they had to go and fight against even the people of the book until they pay the jizya with willing submission and feel themselves subdued, as the Quran says in 929, chapter 9, verse 29. That they would have told Sophronius, or he would have heard about it, that that's why they invaded and conquered, because it was a religious imperative. But he gives no indication of any of that. No indication that they have a new religion at all. And so that's one of the important components of the idea that this whole thing is mythological and not historical.
Oh, dude. Oh, I'm going to be in trouble with my family today. But
Yikes.
um, I want.
I have a book, I got to tell you, before we go on to something else. I have a book about this called Did Muhammad Exist?
Yes.
That I wrote 10 years ago. And I have just completed a revised and expanded edition that will be out early next year, I hope, or at least sometime next year. And so it's got a significant amount of new material in it that further makes the case that the figure of Muhammad as he's depicted in the Hadith is a legend, a myth, not historical reality. So if you're interested in that, you can pick up the new revised and expanded edition of Did Muhammad Exist next year.
Wow. Oh, wow. That's so. If I could just ask you, because I think I've heard you and David Wood talk about this subject a little bit.
Yeah,
I'm
we
not sure if it
did.
was David Wood or Jay Smith.
Both.
Yeah. What is your view? Do you think Muhammad existed?
I think there was probably someone named Muhammad. However, there are some indications that there's no indication in the first place of anybody named Muhammad before Muhammad. And so that's a strange thing. Also, there is some indication that the name Muhammad, meaning the one who is being praised or the praised one, is a title more than a name, and that it may have applied to other people. And then eventually was applied to the subject of these new legends. And in any case, what seems most likely, given the fact that there are very early mentions of Muhammad that I alluded to a minute ago, although they don't match what Islamic tradition says about him, there probably was somebody by that name. But the idea that he did all these things that are described in the Hadith, there's no basis for thinking that at all.
Wow. But that's where David, kind of with the principle of embarrassment.
Yeah.
Why would they write some of that stuff? Like the fact that he married a 6-year-old girl, the fact that he married his daughter-in-law, the fact that he had the satanic verses, all of those things. Why would they make up that kind of stuff about if they're trying to make this great? What the Quran says. The greatest of all creation.
Yeah. Well, it's actually I devote a chapter in the book Did Muhammad Exist to that question. And in the first place, we have to understand that what would embarrass us and what embarrasses 21st century Muslims does not necessarily embarrass Muslims in the 7th or 8th or 9th centuries.
Oh.
And so when they see Muhammad is 54 and he consummates his marriage with Aisha, that's no problem. And there's never any trace of embarrassment in the stories about Muhammad and Aisha. There is trace of embarrassment in the stories about Muhammad and Zainab. I see that you're frozen. Are you still there? Do we still have a connection?
Yeah, I'm here. I,
Okay, good.
I thought you were
No,
frozen, but
I'm very
yeah,
fine.
okay, but you're back.
Zainab is the daughter-in-law that you mentioned, and
Yeah.
it's a strange story. I mean, it's actually only alluded to in Surah 33 of the Quran that Muhammad is told to marry Zainab, who is his daughter-in-law, his son, whose adopted son's ex-wife. And the way that this is justified is to forbid adoption, so that his adopted son is no longer his adopted son, but just a sort of foster son or a roommate in his house or something. And so therefore the marriage is okay. Now this has every sign of being a story of somebody who is making it up as he goes along, is a false prophet who fell for this woman, and so he makes up some doctrines, and then people he makes up some revelations allowing him to have this woman, and then people protest, and so he makes up some dogmas that justify it. And that may be what happened, but it's also possible, and I thought this was astounding when I read it. I have to attribute it to an Islamic scholar, David S. Powers, David Powers anyway, I'm not really sure of the S. But anyway, he wrote a book called Muhammad is Not the Father of Any of Your Men that I used in my book, Did Muhammad Exist, as a principal source for this material. The idea is this: the story of Zainab in the Quran in chapter 33 ends up with the statement in 33:40, chapter 33, verse 40, that Muhammad is not the father of any of your men, but is the seal of the prophets. Now, what does that have to do with Zayd, his adopted son, and Zainab? Nothing whatsoever, unless, as Powers posits, that's the whole point of the story. And indeed, why the story was invented. Because the idea in Islam, as is established in several hadith, is that all the prophets are related. They're all of one family. And so if Muhammad has a son, even an adopted son, then he's a prophet too. So if you're going to codify the religion and not have any more prophets and end the revelation, then you have to have an end to progeny. You can't have Muhammad have any sons. And it's emphasized that this is ruled out by the ruling out of adoption as well, so that you can't, nobody can even come up and claim, I am the descendant of Zayd bin Muhammad, Muhammad's adopted son, and therefore I'm a prophet. Muhammad has no natural sons, he has no adopted sons, and therefore he's the seal of the prophets. Because his son, you see, would be a prophet. And so, in other words, the whole thing could have been invented in order to justify the idea that Muhammad is the last prophet and to allow for an end to the Quranic revelation, so there's not this chaos of new prophets arising with new revelations that will constantly put the Islamic State in turmoil.
Wow. I've never heard that. You know, when you say it that way, I could almost see how Omar bin Khattab or Abu Bakr may have had a hand in it, you know, because they want,
Yeah.
and that this would you know, keep him from
you see, it could be an anti-Shiite polemic. And so Umar and Abu Bakr, they do it to justify their own claim versus that of Ali ibn Abi Talib.
Now someone, Adam, who is also an ex-Muslim, and he's got a great live stream too. He says, but he had an adopted son which he nullified.
Right, that's what we're just talking about. That the story has him having an adopted son, and then because of his marriage to Zainab, or to enable his marriage to Zainab in the Quranic scheme, according to chapter 33, verse 37, also with reference to 33:4, which nullifies adoption, then you have, because the adoption is nullified, Zainab is not his daughter-in-law, and therefore he can marry her. So the nullification of adoption is necessary for him to marry Zainab. So it's either that he's a total lech and he nullifies adoption so that he can marry this woman, which is possible.
Which is
Or-
what I've always heard. Yeah.
Sure. Or there's no Muhammad the prophet at all, and the whole thing of the adopted son being repudiated was invented so as to emphasize that he has no sons of any kind, and therefore is the seal of the prophets, and Revelation is closed.
Oh.
And the Shiites are wrong, you see, because the Shiites
Wow.
said that the Imam has to be somebody from Muhammad's household. And so
Oh.
the Sunnis are saying, no, Muhammad doesn't have any sons. Therefore, the Imam cannot be somebody of Muhammad's household.
Oh, wow. Dude, that totally opens a whole different, view of that situation. Because I want to get on, because I want to get to France. I just had one more question for you before I get to France. And that is, you used a phrase in one of your speeches that really, the reason I liked it is because I've thought about this, and I totally believe it. But you gave a name to it. And when you give that name to it, it's exactly what I was thinking, and it fits perfectly with what I feel about Islam. And you use the phrase inoculation against Christianity.
Yeah, that's
Can
what
you
the
explain
Quran
that? Could you also, first of all, explain what inoculation means, and then
Yeah,
how Islam?
I'm not a physician, and so I don't know anything about this except that I've gotten a couple of vaccines in my life, and they I was told that they work by giving you like a flu shot. They give you a little bit of the flu, and then your
Okay.
body builds up an immunity to the flu, so that when the real flu comes around, it doesn't get you. I
Wow.
think that's how they work, and that's how I was using the word in this phrase, that the Quran gives you a little bit of Christianity and tells you that there was Jesus and he got the gospel and he was born of a virgin and all these things that Christianity teaches, but then also tells you, but the Christians have it all wrong, and he was not the Son of God, did not rise from the dead, did not save us from our sins, was not crucified, so on and so on. And so Muslims are inoculated against Christianity because they get a little bit of it and then they build up the immunity based on the refutations of Christianity that are in the Quran, so that they think that they have Christianity all figured out, and they think that they know why it's all wrong because the Quran says so. And it's very hard for Christians to come to Muslims and deal with that, because I'll give you an actual example from my own life, and that is my buddy Mahmoud, who was a friend I had in college. And he and I used to have a good time getting together and arguing about religion. And one time I said to him, the Christianity, we consider God our Father and have a closeness to God that Islam does not offer. And he said, you think God is your father? Then why does he punish you for your sins? And he sat back and he was so happy with himself. And I was sort of shocked. I didn't know what he was talking about until I read on in the Quran. I believe it's chapter 5, verse 18, that says the Christians and Jews say, we are God's children and his beloved. Ask them, why does he punish you for your sins? So there it was. Are you still here? Yes, apparently. Are you here? I don't know if you're here or not. I see a blue screen. I see over here in the comments, Allah left them as orphans, and now I'm feeling that way myself. I guess we've lost our connection, ladies and gentlemen, so it's been great. I'm going to get back to work. Have a good evening.